Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I am SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In this first installment, we are going to cover zones, specifically attack, defensive, and neutral zones. Before we start, everything I cover in these videos are just basic guidelines to help get you more familiar with the meta. These represent only my interpretation of the meta, and it may not be shared by everyone. So we'll begin with an analogy. In the game of basketball, the court is split into two halves. To your team, these are the offensive and defensive zones. The defensive zone is the half occupied by your team's goal, and the offensive zone is the half occupied by the other team's goal. Hockey does this as well with offensive and defensive zones, but hockey also adds a neutral zone in the center of the ice. In both sports, it is the rules of the game that define the zones and thus influence the strategies that teams develop around them. And in Echo Arena, we effectively take this concept of zones one step further. It is common, even the norm, to identify the two halves of the arena as the offensive and defensive zones from your team's perspective. But in practice, what you effectively have are two defensive zones, two neutral zones, and two attack zones. Mid doubles as both an attack and defensive zone depending on whether or not you control the disc. In Echo Arena, an offensive attack happens in two stages. First, the offense has to get through mid, and then they can set up for an attack on the bubble. There is no bubble attack before getting through the choke point at mid. In the analogy we started with, where game rules were what define the zones, here it is a level design of the arena, i.e. the geometry, e.g. this choke point, that creates this unique defensive zone. So then what is a neutral zone? For offense, this is a zone in which you tend to stage your attacks from. For defense, this is basically a zone that you do not overcommit defensive coverage to. And again, it is the level design here that creates this effective zone. With so much space, it is much easier for the offense to successfully complete passes and otherwise progress up the field. That is, as opposed to mid, where the geometry creates a choke point, or bubble, where the geometry funnels everything into a smaller and smaller area around the goal, and thus these are far more viable as defensive strongholds. So in the end, it is the lack of defensive viability that creates these neutral zones. So how do you use this information? On offense, it's good to be able to predict how and where the defense will be setting up to defend. Conversely, on defense, it is good to know where your geographic strengths are, that is, what areas of the map provide you with advantages on defense. This knowledge can inform you while devising both offensive and defensive strategies and plays, and may better help you make necessary adjustments during a real game. Some core concepts to always keep in mind are space and numbers. These exist on a sliding scale where more space and fewer numbers tends to favor the offense, while less space and more numbers tends to favor the defense. Numbers here just meaning the number of players in a given area. Now with all that said, what are your thoughts? Does this help you visualize the game any better? Do you completely disagree with what I had to say? Or maybe you had some questions or even a potential topic for a future 3-Minute Meta. Please leave them all in the comments below this video. I will be reading through all of them, so feedback is greatly appreciated. But that's it for this installment of 3-Minute Meta. In the next, we're going to cover offensive joust schemes. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In the second installment, we are going to cover offensive joust schemes. Offensive formations have three basic schemes: protect, neutral, and aggressive. In a protect scheme, the quarterback will typically stop at or around the crow's nest, and the first pass will typically be somewhere in the backfield. Common uses of this strategy are plays such as a chain breaker, where three players will set up in a triangle formation in the backfield for quick, short passes. A fourth player will generally set up somewhere in midfield for the out pass once the play progresses. The goal of the triangle is to bait the chain into chasing the passes and getting said chain broken up. The ideal scenario is that one of your players will end up holding two of their players in the backfield as your remaining three players begin pushing the disc up the field towards the attack zone at mid in an effective 3v2 advantage. The neutral scheme is likely one you are already intimately familiar with. In a neutral scheme, the quarterback typically allows their momentum to continue forward as the receivers push into the midfield. This brings the initial offensive attack directly to the zone at mid. The most common play in Echo Arena, the standard split, is a neutral offensive joust scheme. In this play, you typically send a receiver to each tube and one down center. The play is designed to allow the quarterback to first get a read on the opposing team's defensive coverage and then make a judgment call on what to do next. Finally, we have the aggressive scheme. You may actually be just as familiar with this strategy as the previous. Simply speaking, the aggressive offensive joust scheme is set up with the intent of getting the disc as deep into the opposing team's zone as quickly as possible. A relay is one of the more common versions of an aggressive scheme. Similar to a standard split, but the relay will instead pair two receivers together. The second receiver will launch with the first and pick up an extra boost in order to carry their momentum deep into the offensive zone. The idea is for the first receiver to relay the disc to that deep player as quickly as they can accurately. Another basic version of the scheme is a simple deep pass, sending your receivers all boosting into the offensive zone and hoping to sneak a long pass past the defense. So what do you do with this information? When developing plays for your team, it is good to be sure that your playbook covers an array of strategic options. You may also find that your team is especially effective when operating under a specific scheme, but your opponent may discover that as well. At higher levels of play, Echo Arena is a game of chess, just like any other sport. Predicting, baiting, and responding to your opponent's strategic decisions are as important as making saves and scoring goals. Thus, understanding the fundamental principles behind these strategic decisions is as important as practicing your shot. But what do you think? Does your team use any plays that do or don't conform to these schemes? Do you completely disagree with what I had to say? Or maybe you have some ideas for future 3-minute meta? Please leave them all in the comments below. I will be reading through all of them, so feedback is greatly appreciated. But that's it for the second installment of 3-minute meta. In episode 3, we are going to cover defensive joust schemes. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I am SirDimwi, and this is 3-minute meta. In this third installment, we are going to cover defensive joust schemes. So I'm going to throw a whole bunch of numbers at you, and then we're going to break them down. 2-1-1, 1-2-1, 1-1-2, 2-2, and 1-1-1-1, though we're just going to call this man from here on. These are your basic defensive joust schemes. With the exception of man coverage, the three numbers correspond to three assignments in the following order: forecheck, midfield, and backfield. The numbers represent how many players you're committing to each of these assignments, and pairs typically represent chain pairs. So we'll start with the most common, and so likely the one most familiar to you, the 2-1-1. This scheme is typically run by sending a chain in the direction of the opposing team's quarterback, sending one player up to mid, typically to cover a pass option, and leaving a player back to guard against long shots, deep passes, and clears. It's the most common style of defensive coverage because it also tends to be the safest to run. Any players you send deep are in a pair and so can boost back on defense. There's a goalie protecting the bubble and goal, and the midfield player is not too far out to generally get caught behind the play if the offense progresses through mid. Conversely, a 1-2-1 scheme, while used a fair bit at the competitive level, is also a generally vulnerable scheme. This scheme sends a single player in the direction of the quarterback while setting a chain up to attack the first or second pass. The aggressive nature of the play does lead to some moderate success in forcing a quick turnover. But if the play does not succeed, there's a fair chance that the forechecking player will be caught well behind the play, and thus the offense may be able to push a 4v3 all the way to the goal. This is not to say that the 1-2-1 should not be used, only that you should be aware of the dangers when deploying this scheme. The 2-2 scheme is one that utilizes two defensive chains, generally one to attack the quarterback and one to attack the first pass, or some other combination of similar assignments. It's an incredibly flexible strategy given the mobility of having all players on the field in boosting pairs, but it can also be vulnerable to tube shots and long bounce shots if the chains are not quick enough to track down those shots. The 1-1-2 scheme you might consider as more of an alternative to the 2-2 scheme, where instead of sending a pair at the QB, that pair splits with one going to QB and one covering a pass option. This makes the first pass more predictable for the back chain, and so they can set up in a more favorable position to attack. And finally, man coverage is probably one of the most aggressive formations a defense can utilize. This scheme sends each player to cover each of the opposing team's players one-on-one. The idea is to take out all available options while also applying a pressure to the quarterback in order to force a bad pass or otherwise any manner of turnover. So long as you're aware of the position of your teammates and can quickly get back together to change your bubble in the event that the coverage breaks down, man coverage should only be moderately more vulnerable than a 2-2 or 1-1-2. So now I'm curious, what sorts of defensive schemes have you seen deployed? Which ones do you consider the most effective? Do you think I missed something or got something wrong? Or do you have any ideas for other 3-minute metas? Please leave them all in the comments below this video. I will be reading through all of them, so feedback is greatly appreciated. But that's it for this installment of 3-minute meta. In the next, we are going to cover initial attack vectors. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I am SirDimwi, and this is 3-minute meta. In this installment, we're going to talk about your initial attack vectors. Your initial attack vector is effectively the point at which you're intending to first engage your opponent. This decision is made on both offense and defense, whether it is done consciously or incidentally. On offense, it is pretty straightforward. Your scheme determines your attack vector. Protect puts the attack vector into your backfield, neutral puts it at mid, and aggressive puts it on the other side of mid. However, on defense, what determines your initial attack vector is where you first intend to attack the disc. In one variation of a 2-on-1 scheme, you might run an aggressive stack where the chain regrabs at full tilt, intending to sack the quarterback or otherwise cause an immediate disruption. This sets the initial attack vector in the opposing team's backfield, as the chain is intending to first engage with the disc in the hands of the quarterback shortly after launch. However, an alternative variation may be running a passive chain where your stack players stop at double diamonds and wait for the quarterback to make the first pass before striking. In this variation, your initial attack vector is more likely at mid, where that first pass is likely to end up. Whether you are on offense or defense, every time you pick a play, you are identifying a zone as your initial attack vector. And so with this in mind, the question you should be asking is why? Why are you choosing that attack vector? One of the first considerations you should make in answering this question is attack vector compatibility. When the offense and defense choose the same zone as their attack vectors, these are compatible. When the offense and defense choose different zones as their attack vectors, these are incompatible. The compatibility of initial attack vectors is not a judgment of desirability. No given pair is inherently good or bad for your team in any given situation. But when picking a play, you should be conscious of how it might break down given different compatibilities. If you're intending to run a standard split, in what ways do any given defensive coverages affect the execution of that play? That's really what this is about. How does X play stack up against Y defensive coverage? But there are so many small variations in each scheme from play to play and team to team on both offense and defense that we can simplify and look for tendencies. A protect scheme will not always break down the same way under the same compatibilities, but it may tend to break down in similar ways under the same compatibility. You ultimately want to be able to identify which compatibilities are best and worst for your team, but also which compatibilities are best and worst for the other team. This is the first step in playing that proverbial game of chess. It doesn't matter how strong your queen is if you don't have a strategy within which to use her. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. This is my first scripted episodic series here on YouTube, and the response to it has been amazing. Every bit of feedback you can give me is greatly appreciated, and of course, if you have any ideas for future 3-minute metas, or if you have any other comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. But that's it for this installment of 3-Minute Meta. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In this supplemental to attack vectors, I'd like to introduce you to a concept known as Yomi. Yomi is a Japanese word that, in this colloquial usage, means reading, as in reading an opponent. This usage of the word originated in the fighting game scene, first appearing alongside the game Virtua Fighter. More generally, this concept is about understanding your opponent, knowing their strengths and their weaknesses, and more importantly, their tendencies. But more specifically, Yomi refers to taking that knowledge and using it to predict what your opponent will do in the game. In a versus game like Echo Arena, both teams are making these predictions, and this gets us to Yomi layers. So let's say your team is exceptionally good at running the standard split to get through mid. This is Yomi layer 0. No predictions have happened, but it forms a foundation. Your opponent has discovered that you often rely on this play to get through mid, so they decide to counter with a man coverage scheme as they've noticed this scheme is relatively strong against your standard split. This is Yomi layer 1. Your opponent has predicted your behavior and decided to counter. But let's say you are aware that your standard split is weak to man coverage, and you know your opponent knows this as well. So in order to counter their man coverage, you instead decide to run an aggressive relay, knowing that there's a fair chance it can sneak past their man coverage. This is Yomi layer 2. You have predicted your opponent's prediction. But now, your opponent is aware of all that, so in order to counter your counter to their counter, they decide to run a 1-1-2 scheme in order to trap the deep receiver in a 2v1 and force a turnover. This is Yomi layer 3. Now, as you can see, we can continue down this path of recursion basically to infinity with all the small changes and variations we could make to our rollouts and countering the countering to an opponent. But in reality, at this point in time, you have a choice. You can either fall down the rabbit hole of recursion and never come to a decision, or you can loop back to Yomi layer 0 and run your standard split against their 1-1-2 and see a more ideal situation than running it against their man. But here's the point. Which Yomi layer is ultimately deployed is effectively random. If both teams are playing their Yomi game, what you ultimately end up with is a game of rock, paper, scissors. However, the fact that it is effectively random does not mean there is no benefit. Let's say you refuse to play the Yomi game and you just stick with your standard split for every play. What you end up seeing is standard split versus man coverage for most of the game. However, if you decide to play the Yomi game, you end up with more opportunities to run the standard split against a 1-1-2. This gives you more opportunities overall to deploy your strongest play against a weak counter. Over the course of a game, this can result in more opportunities attacking the bubble and thus more goals. So I'd like to thank Rocks Titan for introducing me to this concept. This video would have been on a parallel concept that, while relevant, was not nearly as organized. So big thanks to him for making this video possible. These supplemental videos will release on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern, but only when I feel it is necessary to provide one for any given 3-minute meta. There will be another supplemental next Friday following the release of my resetting video this Monday, but there may not be one released every Friday. So as always, thank you very much for watching. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In this installment, we are going to cover resets. In the next couple videos, we will be going over neutral zone offense, but before we can do that, we need to touch on resets. A common synonym for reset is a backpass, but these are in fact two distinct things. A backpass is nothing more than the act of sending a pass to a teammate in the direction of your own goal. A reset, on the other hand, is a specific type of backpass with a specific purpose. When you send a reset to your backliner, you are in effect resetting the play. You are restarting your attack effort. When we talked about zones, we also talked about the two stages of attack in Echo Arena, and that these two stages are at mid and bubble. So when you are resetting the play, you are allowing your team to properly set up for an attack on either the mid or the bubble. In either situation, this setup is taking place in a neutral zone, and that backpass, that reset, is being sent to a player in the backfield of that given neutral zone. So when is it appropriate to reset the play? This is actually fairly simple to define. A reset will generally only occur in the following situations. 1. You've just broken through mid and are intending to set up to attack the bubble. 2. You just forced a turnover in your own zone. Or 3. Your first attempt to attack a zone failed and you have maintained or regained possession of the disc. This isn't to say that you should always reset in these situations. Rather, there just really aren't any other situations that will call for a reset. It's an obvious point to be sure, but only because in making it we ignore the nuance of exactly when a reset is most appropriate. Another important factor to consider when calling for a reset is your numbers situation. How many players do they have between the disc and the attack zone, and how many players do you have for a coordinated attack? If your number is smaller, you likely want to reset the play in order to obtain a better number situation. One of the most difficult bad habits to break in Echo Arena is the inclination to always be moving forward, which also makes resets one of the most difficult good habits for a team to develop. The core of the breakdown lies in a lack of strategic consideration. If you're in a situation that would otherwise call for a reset, you're likely in a situation where the defense has an advantage. If you continue to drive forward despite being at a disadvantage, you increase the chances that the defense will stop the drive and force a turnover. This is a poor strategic decision, even if it sometimes still earns you a goal. You have to train yourself both as a team and as an individual to recognize your strategic situation at any given time. Being able to break down the arena into simple terms, in this case numbers, makes it easier to keep an eye on the overall strategic situation. So long as you're aware of your number situation, you should typically be able to determine when it is appropriate to reset the play. So in the next two videos, we'll be going over neutral zone offense, which I break down into two sections: turnover offense and bubble offense. Following those videos will be my bubble defense episodes, so to those of you that have been requesting it, this is your roadmap to when I intend to deliver on that. But as always, I thank you very much for watching. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In this installment, we are going to cover turnover offense. Unfortunately, for the vast majority of Echo Arena players, turnover offense amounts to a single strategy: clear and boost. And while a coordinated clear and boost strategy is certainly not a bad one, it is also not the only one. Furthermore, there is a fine line between a coordinated clear and boost strategy versus a panic clearing and hoping you have some teammates close enough to chain together quick enough to get to the disc before the other team strategy. Now, of course, a turnover can happen anywhere in the arena, but when we're talking about turnover offense, we are more often than not referring to turnovers that happen in your own zone, typically when the opposing team is attacking your bubble. This is often one of the most difficult areas of the game for a team to practice and become comfortable with. In these moments, when you've just stolen the disc from the other team right at the edge of your own bubble, your deepest instinct is to clear the disc away from trouble. But success in Echo Arena comes down to the choices we make, and a panic clear is not a choice, it's a bad habit. But before we get to choices, the most important part of a turnover offense is communication. When you score that turnover, it should be immediately communicated that you are in transition. This tells your teammates to begin setting up your turnover offense. This is so important because you may only have a few seconds to react in this situation, so the sooner everyone is on the same page, the better. If you're going with a clear and boost strategy, the moment the disc turns over, a pair of players should be linking together to chain after the disc. You should know before the other team when the disc is getting cleared with instructions on where it is headed. They do not need to be overly specific, but just announcing where the disc is heading as you throw it can give your chain the advantage over an opposing chain. Once the disc is cleared, your remaining 2 players should typically link together and boost downfield so you can set up an attack on the bubble if needed. The common alternative to a clear and boost offense is to set up in a passing formation. This is very much similar to choosing an offensive Joust scheme. The moment a turnover happens, your team should start fanning out in an offensive formation looking to set up an attack on mid. What is important here is that everyone has an assignment and knows where they should be going. The specific scheme you choose matters, but not as much as simply having a scheme. In any case, when setting up in this formation, it should also be seen as setting up to attack mid. Where clear and boost is more like an aggressive Joust scheme, formation passing on a turnover is generally deploying more of a protect scheme. Passes here should generally be quick, with no one holding the disc for longer than a few moments. If the defense is operating with a chain, there should be an effort to break up or otherwise slow down the attacking chain to clear space enough to get through mid. If the defense is playing with an aggressive man, you need to be winning those 1v1s, otherwise known as your 50-50s, in either slipping in front of your defender or setting them out and leaving them behind. The goal is to move up the field as a unit using your passes to keep the defense off balance. If you are having trouble progressing forward, consider a reset to draw the defense into your zone and then make another attempt with more space in mid. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3 Minute Meta. Let's talk about bubble offense. So you just got your team through mid, and you're now set to attack the bubble. There are 2 primary formations when attacking the bubble, deep and shallow. In a deep formation, you will typically have your backliner around double diamond or otherwise in the backfield. 2 of your forwards will generally be split on either side of the trench, and you'll tend to have a striker somewhere in the bubble putting threat on the goal. The shallow formation is basically just a compressed version of the deep formation, putting the backline on or around bow tie, and with all 3 forwards either pressing the bubble or putting threat on the goal. The primary purpose of both formations is for the backliner to first draw out a defender, and for your team to press a numbers advantage. The ideal situation would see the backliner disabling this defender and rejoining the play. But even if the backliner gets tangled up, the numbers situation is still better for the offense. When considering the numbers when attacking the bubble, it is fair to consider the goalie as half a body. So even in what otherwise appears to be a 3v3 situation, it is functionally more like a 3v2.5 due to the fact that the goalie is committed to staying in goal but can still dive after cross passes and for 1v1s. So when we're talking about pressing this numbers advantage, it doesn't necessarily mean that the backliner is rejoining the play. So long as the backliner pulls that defender out, the 3 forwards can press a numbers advantage. Following this logic, however, means that going in 4v4 also presents a numbers advantage, but with so many bodies in the bubble, the spatial advantage will generally go to the defense. With too many bodies in such a small area, too many lanes are intersecting, and multiple lanes can be more easily covered by a single person. So pulling that defender out is typically the most efficient way to attack the bubble, for even if your backliner fails at getting back into the play, you are still in a more ideal situation. By attacking with a numbers advantage, you ensure that at least one of your players is mostly free of defensive coverage for the duration of the attack. This means that there's always an open lane to be exploited, and it's just a matter of executing on these open lanes until a viable shot lane or cut option presents itself. If for some reason you are unable to find that lane, consider a reset, as that 4th defender at that point is likely rejoining the play, and the more you try to force it forward, the more likely you are to make a mistake. It is also important to note my heavy use of words like tend to and typically in regards to these formations. The only real guidelines I would offer as far as your exact positioning is to stay spread out, always have threat on the goal, and be mindful of your backline. If at any point in time, from when you gain possession of the disc to when you are attacking the bubble, if you manage to get a defender stuck behind your backline, you have the advantage, and you should press and maintain this advantage all the way to the goal, every single time. So next week, we are going to cover bubble defense. I know some of you have been patiently waiting for that one, and I love you for it. I can't wait to get it out to you. I also encourage anyone who has questions or comments to leave them below. I respond frequently and will sometimes pin contributions or rebuttals to the topics I cover. So really, let me know what you think. But I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3 Minute Meta. Bubble defense is going to be the final topic I cover in what I am calling the core of this series. This is not the end of 3-Minute Meta, but it is the end of this more structured and general section. Each new video in the series will be covering a specific aspect of strategy, going into a short deep dive or breakdown of why strategy did or did not work in a given scenario, or covering other topics that this first section did not, such as launch configurations or more specific plays in a given scheme. But with that out of the way, let's talk about bubble defense. The concepts behind bubble defense are fairly simple and straightforward. If the offense breaks through mid, drop back and defend the bubble. Once you're in the bubble, coordinate your coverage. Cover lanes at the edge and cover bodies in the bubble. And most importantly, never leave the goal uncovered. Of course, in simplifying to such a degree, we're ignoring a lot of nuance and more specific strategies. But much like everything else in Echo Arena, the specifics can be innumerable, and the meta, particularly in regards to defense, is still actively evolving. When set up in the bubble, it is common to see the offense hold the disc deep in the neutral zone. Their intent is to draw out your defense. In general, if you have the lead, you can let them sit there and burn the clock down. However, if you are behind, all that time lost is time that you could use to regain the lead. If you decide to challenge the disc carrier, there are two general options, single or chain. The trade-offs here should be apparent. A single player is more vulnerable and will generally take longer to get back to the bubble, but if they get stuck out, you are down only that one player. A chain, on the other hand, may be more effective and can get back to the bubble quicker, but if they get stuck out, you're down two players. Neither option is more ideal as a rule. It ultimately comes down to which option your specific team is better at executing or which option your specific opponent is more vulnerable to. If the offense is setting up just outside the bubble, commit your defenders to covering their shot lanes. In general, don't leave the bubble to cover the player, but rather stay inside the bubble while keeping your body between that player and the goal. As the offense starts sending players into the bubble, these players should be called or assigned and covered man to man. Be mindful of stunning here, as a poorly timed stun on your part could end up as a well-timed invulnerability on their part. If coverage is solid, the disc carrier may opt to drive in instead of pass. If a defender is going to dive at the carrier, they should be diving in the pass lane to the player they were otherwise covering. Alternatively, if the goalie decides to dive, whether at a diving player or a loose disc, the nearest defender should immediately rotate into the goal to cover for the goalie. There are many specific coordination and coverage options while defending the bubble. However, the manner in which you assign players to coverage is less important than simply coordinating those assignments. As long as you take that first step in coordination, your specific tactics can evolve over time. So that's it for the core of 3-Minute Meta. It may or may not be a few weeks before the next part of the series continues, but it will return. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to learn the meta of Echo Arena. This VR sport has become my passion, and your success is my success. The only way this sport becomes the thing we all want it to be is if we become the players we are all determined to become. So again, thank you for your interest in the Echo Arena meta. With all that said, I've been SirDimwi. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful season. Good afternoon, Jacks and Jills. I'm SirDimwi, and this is 3-Minute Meta. In this installment, we are going to talk about Pop-Tarts. Now, you might be wondering, which flavor of Pop-Tart is the best for my position? And while this is ultimately a subjective decision, you as an individual should do what is best for you. We can identify tendencies. Now, it is somewhat common, you might even say the norm, for teams to unify around a single flavor. And while uniformity can breed cohesion, you wouldn't generally want a 4-man team of strikers that were not so great at defense. So that's where we'll start. For strikers, chocolate flavored Pop-Tarts are going to provide the most direct benefit. As a striker, you will commonly find yourself in stressful situations, and what better way to calm those nerves than with a chocolatey breakfast. The additional sugar content will also provide you with the energy you need to stay in front of that aggressive defense. For midfielders and playmakers, it's really about your style of play. If you're the brawler type, you're going to want to go with blueberry because that's what you tend to dish out, blueberries. Playmakers want to lean more towards cherry or strawberry. These flavors will provide comfort when you come to terms with the middle child nature of your position on the team. And for those of you that are particularly good at those 1v1s and stealing the disc, raspberry, because And finally, for our goalies, for the stay-at-home defenseman style of goalies, s'mores are the go-to flavor. They give that at-home by-the-fireplace feeling for when you're camped out in the backfield. And for our dive goalies and offensive style goalies, cinnamon sugar. The bite from the cinnamon gives you that small slap you require to stay awake and aware in the goal, and the extra sugar content gives you the energy for those small bursts of action you find yourself in periodically. In the end, the flavor you choose is up to you, but consider the benefits of utilizing particular flavors for particular situations. You will generally find that a diversity of flavors on any given team will provide the best overall results within uniformity. As always, thank you very much for watching. I've been SirDimwi. Please don't take this one seriously. Shout out to the Echo Arena VRML Discord server, The Real Mamba, Princess Saluna, Sphinx Dollar, and so many others that will be upset I didn't give a shout out, and have a wonderful day.